Hi everyone, welcome to today's webinar, The Unpleasant Truths of Modern Business Cybersecurity. My name is Michelle and I'll be helping with today's session. Before we get started, I'd like to review a few housekeeping items and let you know how you can participate. This webinar is being recorded, so we will provide you a link to the recording as soon as it is available. You have joined today's webinar listening through your computer speaker system by default. If you would prefer to use your telephone, just locate your audio pane and select Use Telephone. The dial-in information and access code will then be displayed. You guys will all be in listen-only mode, but we will invite you to ask questions about the presentation using the questions panel. Just type in your question there and click send. At the end of the webinar, we will do a Q&A session and take as many of those questions as possible. So let's also continue the conversation on Twitter by using the hashtag CyberAware. Now I'd like to introduce you to our presenter today. Phil Shade is the founder of Merlions Keep Consulting, a professional services company specializing in network and forensic analysis. An internationally recognized network security and forensics expert with more than 30 years of experience. Phil is a member of FBI InfraGard, Computer Security Institute, and the IEEE, as he is a volunteer at the Cyber Warfare Forum Initiative. So thanks so much, Phil, for being here with us today. Welcome, and I will go ahead and turn it over to you.
Oh, thank you very much, Michelle. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on where you're talking from the world. I just came back a few days ago, as a matter of fact, from Europe. I was working over there doing some forensic investigations. So I'm as probably jet-lagged out as everybody else. So, the unpleasant truth about modern cyber business security. It's a simple, unpleasant fact. People seem to think that because they've bought a security product or they've been to a class or they have somebody that's their designated cyber security watchdog that life is good. Unfortunately, as I hope to be able to demonstrate to you today, there's quite a difference between what we think we have and what we really have. Case in point, just a collection of headlines that I've pulled out of various places online. Some of you probably recognize quite a few of these. It just seems like it's another day, another hack. The most recent one, of course, was the wonderful little Ashley Madison thing that is all over the news. It just keeps on coming, the bad news in our business. So what I tell customers and clients right away, the first time I meet them, is accept the fact that you're going to have an intrusion. You can call it a hack, you can call it a virus, whatever you want to call it. The reason is, the simple explanation is, as defenders, we have to stop everything. We have to stop every intrusion. Unfortunately for us, the bad guy only needs to succeed once. And we're going to be looking at a couple of case studies here in a few moments, and I'll try to walk you through some of the things that have occurred. And I'll be blunt, 99% of the successful intrusions are due to human error. It's that simple. The equipment is there, the procedures invariably in every investigation I've been part of. The company procedures, policies, regulations, whatever you want to call them, have been correct. And if they had been followed, I wouldn't have been there. So let's take a look. So we have a poll that Michelle's going to put up there that simply says, have you been hacked or had a computer virus? Just a simple yes or no. So you should see the polling icon has popped up there, and I'm just curious, that's all. It's just a survey question. So I'll give everybody a few seconds to enter their responses, and then we'll go forward from there. Okay, so
Like we've got about 82% say yes and 18% say no.
Excellent. That's wish I could be in the 18% there. Unfortunately, in our business, it happens. So here's what we're going to look at today. 4 basic case studies, and we're going to look at probably the biggest one that I've addressed already, the gap between what we think is secure and modern business realities. I'm going to talk about one of my favorite ones, which would be training and equipping the current generation of cyber professionals. And then, of course, the impact of not having trained personnel and some type of ongoing end-user training program. And then a topic that's been gaining a lot of attention lately in our business is the advantages versus disadvantages of outsourcing versus keeping your security considerations, requirements, and needs in-house. So without further ado, let's take a look at our first case study. The gap between what we think is secure and modern business realities. I can't claim to be the author of this report. I snagged it from a buddy of mine at Cisco. And to me, it sums up how what people think is true or their perception versus the reality. Invariably, when we do security assessments, I work with several penetration testing and security assessment companies. Invariably, we come in, and the vast majority of them say, oh, yeah, we're secure. We're secure. However, I hate to admit that we almost never fail in breaching a company network, despite all of their precautions. And then what we discover is, just as pointed out here, it says barely 54% of them know what to do when they've had a breach. They just don't know what to do, how to handle it, and it invariably goes public. You all know as well as I do how many companies will start off trying to keep everything quiet, only eventually to have to come clean and said, well, yeah, we think we did get hacked. Again, moving down, practically every company has somebody that's designated as the security official in charge. I mean, it goes by dozens of different titles. And then again, we get the perception barely half of them have any clue. And then the last one is pretty self-explanatory. Quite a few people say, yep, we got it, we're good, everything is okay, we know what we're doing. And then we get into the realities. And once again, this just backs up the information I see day to day when doing penetration testing, security assessments, or doing forensic reconstruction of an already happened event. This one was pretty interesting. This report was just published. I don't know how many of you have seen it. It came from Unisys, and it was just published not very long ago. And the scary thing I found is they actually broke down how the penetrations and the attacks happened. And there's a surprising amount of espionage. I mean, this one kind of caught me by surprise. Cyber espionage, people actually breaking in to steal information, whether it's a foreign government, business competitor, or whatever. I mean, I worked for a company several years back that we had a data breach where we could never prove it, but we were pretty sure it was one of our business competitors. And it cost us about $14 million to recover. And we were a small private-owned company, and that was a pretty big chunk of money for us. We did recover. We did determine where the breach occurred. And again, it was human error. So just some statistics to look at. And then the cybercrime, of course, that's the one we all know of. People stealing information and selling it, whatever. Again, statistics are statistics. You can probably find a statistic to back up anything. But this was kind of scary about the number of attacks. And they basically happen, as you can see there on the left, practically every minute. Now, these are not global statistics. I have no idea what they would be worldwide. These are just for companies in the United States that responded to a survey targeting security professionals. So things continue. So let's continue on. You might recognize the logo. Training and equipping current cyber professionals. I have another information poll that I'm just curious. Dealing with the Target data breach, did any of you have to replace one or more credit cards or debit cards? I know that between my wife and I and our son, he was telling us about it later, we had 3 different cards that were affected by this breach. So again, you should be seeing a poll pop up. Just to get a quick survey of our audience, we get more and more people are connecting in. Let's take a look. Okay. And what have we got?
58% yes and 42% no.
58%. Well, I'm definitely in that category, unfortunately. So let's take a look. This is the one that's probably affected the most people and garnered the most publicity. So the things that were found interesting, and by the way, my knowledge of this is first person. I was part of one of the 3 forensic teams that were brought in to document what occurred. They brought in 3 teams of people. We were not allowed to talk to one another. And the idea was if the 3 of us come up with the same pieces of information. So the background, Target, the company, they had actually purchased, installed, configured. They had done everything correctly for one of the best universal threat management, or UTM, systems in existence. I was amazed. I'm familiar with the products, but I've never seen the full suite implemented with all the bells and whistles. The company that set up the system for them did an extraordinarily good job of providing real-world functional training. I actually reviewed some of the courseware material. It's good. I'll be honest, I wish I could have written that well. Unfortunately, human nature intervened. As with most companies that I see when I do security training, the more senior people were the ones that were sent to the training. The theory was they would in turn take the information back to their company and train their junior personnel. Well, none of us like to work weekends, and none of us certainly like to work on the holidays. So rank has its privileges, and come the weekends and the late night shifts, the junior people were given those shifts. And to be honest, they weren't the best trained. And if you think about it, we've all been guilty of doing something like this. So there's the scene of the crime. Those of you that have been inside a Target undoubtedly recognize that little piece of hardware. So what kind of damage could that thing do? It's just the thing that we use to swipe our credit card or an ATM card to pay for our purchases. There's millions of these things around the world. So here's what happened. It started with a contractor, a third-party contractor. It was the company that was responsible for maintaining the heating and cooling systems. Somebody in the company lost control of the credentials, their username and password. And to be honest, the Target had done the right thing. The contractors didn't have access to any kind of sensitive systems. Unfortunately, there is a well-known technique, it's been used since the 70s, called an escalation of privilege. It's where you compromise a low-level system and you use it to gain access to a higher-level system. And this is exactly what happened. They worked their way through the network, and they got a hold of access to the point of sale server. This is the server that sends updated information to all of those lovely little tabletop credit card machines. So once they gained access to the point of sale server, they loaded up the malware. And this particular malware was designed to capture user information, more specifically credit card numbers, debit card numbers, PIN numbers, and user IDs. This information was collected over a period of several months. And to be honest, the guys that did it, it was a team of Ukrainian hackers. They were good. They collected this information for quite a while before they did anything with it to avoid alerting Target. Once they had sufficient information, which, by the way, in this case, turned out to be about 110 million credit card and debit card numbers, they turned around and started selling it online. Here is one of the places. This is a dark web website. I was prowling around after we were notified that our cards were breached, and lo and behold, I stumbled onto a website. I'm not going to say where it is. It's a darknet site. It's very dangerous to go play with unless you understand Tor browsers. But I will say that one of those numbers on the screen was one of our old credit card numbers. So, not a happy camper. I was very upset to actually find my number online. And as I said before, we ended up having to replace 3 different cards. So, here are the results of the investigation. We were utterly horrified to discover that Target got, when they bought their system, they got what they paid for. The system actually detected the intrusion. The intrusion these hackers pulled off was nothing very special or unique. Like I said, it was a 1970s trick. Where things fell apart, though, the nighttime operators didn't know what to do with the alarms. They didn't understand the alarms, so they turned them off. And they didn't even make a note of it. The log files that we read were actually the system log files. And we could actually see the exact moment these guys turned the alarms off. I mean, the best system in the world, and they turned the alarms off. Like I said, human failure. One piece of good news, though. Target apparently has been approached to turn the data breach into a big screen movie, and there you see the link that I found this information from. So, bit of a silver lining. So what was the effect on us as users? Well, 110 million customers. Target has already paid out over $40 million in penalties. There are a ridiculous number of lawsuits pending. Some of them are just getting started. And Target's stock price so far has collapsed by about 11.3%. And I got the quote out of the Wall Street Journal. That's a lot of money. This leads us directly in to our next section. We talk about what happens when you don't have enough sufficiently trained personnel, and worse, when you don't train your users. And I am not talking about that, you know, the day you get hired and you first show up and you're being rushed from place to place to place to complete all your paperwork, and somebody probably hands you a little pamphlet entitled security, or maybe they have you, maybe they just simply have you watch a little video and sign off, and they say, great, you are now an educated user. So, what do we got? Basically, too many threats, not enough defenders. So if any of you are looking for a job with job security, this would be a good time to take a look at things. According to the ISACA, so far, from 2013 to 2015, we're looking at $3 trillion worth of U.S. damage. That's trillion with a T. And that, they say, is what the global impact is. Over on the professional side, let's be honest, cybersecurity is not a sexy job. It's always more fun to be the bad guy. Everybody wants to be a penetration tester or gray hat hacker such as myself. Nobody wants to be the guy that has to sit there and be on the receiving end of all of this. But that, unfortunately, folks, is where we need the most help. We need defenders. Simple fact, security is a moving target. By this, I simply mean you have to treat security as something that needs to be constantly managed. In other words, just like our software needs updates, our security policies, procedures, equipment, all need to be constantly managed and updated. I've seen repeatedly too many organizations consider the security to be something as just to mark off a checkbox on some checklist. By the time it trickles down to the user level where you and I are, as I said, you get the little video to watch or you get the pamphlet handed to you. It's not good enough. Not anymore. We all hear about it. This is the Federal Cybercrime Survey that just came out. Number one cause of data breaches. It's not the bad guy, the mythical hacker. You know, contrary to what TV and the movies show, it's not the guy sitting in the basement that causes the problems. It's you and I, the people inside the network. We don't pay attention to what we're doing. We click on an email link that we shouldn't. We go to a website that 5 seconds after landing on it, you realize, uh-oh, I'm in the wrong place. It's too late. So 53% of the people, that's where it comes from. I do want to point out a couple of other things. We do have the malicious insider. That is a source of breaches. Hacktivists, this is a new term that's been creeping into our dictionary. Basically, these are people that claim they're hacking for some type of social reason. You know, they're opposed to Big Brother, they're opposed to a certain business that's made decisions that they don't agree with, or whatever. I can tell you, 3 years ago, industrial spying didn't even make this list. It wasn't on this list at all, and now it's encompassing 10% of the data breaches. This is that cyber espionage thing I mentioned earlier. And then here we go. This is focusing in on the insiders, you and I, the everyday users. 49% of us fall for phishing attacks. And a phishing attack is something as simple as an email that is crafted well enough that it looks legitimate. We've all seen plenty of these. Most of them are pretty bad, to be honest. Most of them, you take one look at them, you can say, this is a joke. This can't be real. But the criminals know that as well. They're constantly practicing, and things are getting better in terms of quality of the phishes. People are falling for them. You bad guys wouldn't use these if they didn't work. And then my favorite, copying data to insecure devices. Think USB sticks. These things are deadly. They're also our favorite way of penetrating the network. Using personal devices that are against the company IT policy. I've got an excellent example of this. Afghanistan, the U.S. Air Force base that I will not identify. Their job was to control the drones, those things that are in the news all the time. Well, the drones typically only fly during the day, but the facilities are manned 24 hours a day, just in case. About 3 years ago, they noticed that some of the drone control stations weren't operating correctly. When they started to do a forensic evaluation, they discovered that certain stations were infected with a piece of malware. And that really struck them as unusual because these stations aren't connected to the internet. They're closed off stations. They have no connection to the internet. So there's all of the traditional infection mechanisms couldn't account for why these things were getting infected. So as the investigation team proceeded, they eventually noticed that one particular user was always associated with the workstations that were showing an infection. Once they got it down to a single name and started talking to this young gentleman, who, by the way, is no longer in the Air Force, they discovered that he liked to play Grand Theft Auto, and he had a hacked copy that he could play on PCs. The problem with his hacked copy was it was on a portable hard drive. And while the U.S. military doesn't allow you to use portable equipment, they've disabled the USB ports. This enterprising lad found a way to turn the USB ports on the drone stations. And, you know, to be honest, I kind of envy him. I would love to have $11 million of hardware and a screen that's 5 feet across and a stereo sound system that none of the rest of us could afford to buy. But this is what Junior was doing. Late at night, he'd be in the building all by himself, and he would load up his infected copy of Grand Theft Auto. Again, human failings. So I mentioned earlier about USB sticks. We're talking about social engineering, or using people to achieve the objective, basically using us to do the damage. And take a look at that photograph in the upper right-hand corner. It's not the best quality copy, unfortunately, because it's simply a cell phone capture. This is from a recent penetration testing team. And if you look at those things in the red circle, they're USB sticks. And you can see the car tires there. It's a parking lot. And here's how we do it. The night before the pen test starts, we cheat. We take 20 or 30 of these USB sticks that we've loaded key logging software on. The software is designed to capture anything that has the word user or anything that has the word pass. In other words, we're going to capture usernames and passwords. We then take the infected USB sticks, we scatter them in the employee parking lot, and wait for human nature to take its course. Because if you think about it, free USB sticks, and what's the first thing you're going to do with a USB stick? You're going to stick it in the computer and see what it is you've got. And here's why this trick works. Most software for security, be it antivirus engines, anti-malware, whatever, are set by default to read the media without scanning it. In other words, they're going to give you a list of the files on that USB stick without scanning the stick itself for anything dangerous. You can set your software up to scan the stick before reading it, but that's going to take a whole nother 5-10 seconds, and everybody wants things fast. So what happens is 24 hours later, after people have loaded these things into their computers, their own computer, the next time they open their email client, will email us its results, whatever it's captured. So by the time Friday rolls around and it's time for us to go in and do our brief with the company, and they're sitting there going, yeah, we spotted every attempt you guys made to get into the network. We simply play them a video of their own people picking up these USB sticks, carrying them into their network, and then we pass around a copy of all the data we captured. Now, before you think too badly of us, our malware on the sticks is designed to erase itself after 24 hours because we are the good guys. But think about this. Just think about this. We get these USB sticks everywhere, trade shows, classrooms. I just came back from 5 weeks of training. And during that time, I passed out a lot of information on memory sticks. And I can tell you, out of close to 70 students, only 2 had their PCs set up to read the memory stick. And the reason I know it was that is because 2 different people said, hey, wait a minute, this memory stick that you're giving us shows an executable. And I said, yes, you're right. It's the executable for Adobe Acrobat, because there were PDFs on there, and sometimes people don't have Adobe installed. So just think of that, 2 out of all of those people, and these were security professionals, most of them very senior. So now you're probably taking a look at your software going, how do I set it up? Take a look in the options or advanced configuration. Now, one of the fastest growing sections of the internet, and I'm part of this percentage myself, online gaming. Be it Call of Duty, my particular favorite, Halo. Let's see, my wife does the World of Warcraft thing. My son and I sometimes play Lineage. It's a Korean game. Doesn't matter what you play, your data is valuable. Believe it or not. I know friends that in World of Warcraft have had their accounts hacked and all of their online gaming possessions stolen and sold off to people. That's one example. My wife and I watch our credit cards insanely close. And I mentioned earlier that we'd had 3 cards breached in Target. Well, we missed one initially. It wasn't in the initial reports. The banks didn't even know about it. But what we spotted was a charge for somebody setting up an online account for the Star Wars, I think it's called the New Republic, the Star Wars online game, and buying a whole bunch of in-game currency. So my wife and I are looking at each other going, I don't play, do you? No. So we call our bank and initiate an investigation, and the bank calls us back about 2 days later and say, oops, your credit card number's been stolen. It was being used in Zimbabwe, which is in Africa. I had to go look it up myself. So they, of course, blocked the card. We had to go through the hassle of getting new credit cards, and whoever it was lost their gaming accounts. So I'm pretty sure the majority of us fit into one of these categories here, depending on what gaming system you play. So I've told you all the bad news. How do we fix this? It's going to take top-down. Myself and other people that are trainers, engineers, investigators, inspectors, we do the best we can at the low levels. Companies simply have to allocate the resources. A number of different types of certifications out there. You can see on the list Certified Ethical Hacking, CISSP, various types of forensics training. You also have to initiate some kind of ongoing program. People don't want to cause breaches. I mean, yeah, you get the occasional person that hates where they work and they'll do whatever they can, but most of us are good people. We don't want to cause something, especially by accident. So here are some suggestions that I've seen implemented at various places. Some companies have the newsletter. You put the tip of the month. Banner screens. We made heavy use of this in the military. I'm retired Navy, 20 years working with security. We would have different rotating banner screens. Every time you'd log on to a PC, you'd see a different little, like, one-sentence security blurb. We had 30 of them that we would cycle through. You, of course, have the posters, and probably the biggest one is periodic audits. You've got to be willing to put the time in to have people look at your security program, all the way from the top down. And, of course, nothing replaces just simply paying attention, knowing what's going on. If there was a single perfect solution that I could recommend, trust me, I'd work for the company, and I'd be making a lot of money at it. You have to use layers, just like you do on your Wi-Fi. You wouldn't dream of using your Wi-Fi without some kind of password or some kind of encryption. So you start at the top. There's no excuse for not having some type of firewall or antivirus on your PC. There are tons and tons of free choices. In Windows, you have the NetSH firewall, you've got Windows Defender, and so on and so on. Encrypt your traffic. And I don't just mean VPNs or HTTPS, or commonly called SSL for secure browsing. Encrypt your drives. The number of times in data breaches we read that so many millions of records were stolen, we go back and investigate and we find out that even though the company policy said the data would be encrypted, it's not. These are 3 different freeware encryption tools. They're not top of the line by any means, but they definitely are good against about 90% of the bad guys that might steal your data. Passwords. Passwords are the weak point. Our systems still work off of username and passwords. It's changing with 2-factor authentication. But in the meantime, everybody's heard this. I've heard it a million times. Don't use the same password more than once. Don't use the same password for more than one account. Change your passwords. It's tough. It's tough. Automatic updates. Automatic updates are good. They're very good. Unfortunately, all of those programs that come pre-installed on our PCs and the like that are all set to automatic, on all of my equipment, I have things set up to say, notify me to install the update. That way I can at least see whatever this piece of software is trying to put on my PC. And last but not least, I've said this 3 times, pay attention to things. Know how your computer or your tablet works, or your cell phone. Don't think your cell phones are safe either. If they're not working correctly, stop and ask yourself why. And then the hot button topic of the day, pros and cons of hiring outside or outsourcing versus keeping your stuff inside. I have one last poll for you. I want to know, have you outsourced some portion of your security requirements? So the poll is now open. Please take a moment to answer up. And again, it's just kind of information. It's the way I collect information about things. Okay, so we'll wait for our expert, Michelle, to collate the results, and let's see what we get.
We've got about 62% yes, 38% no.
Wow. 68% of people are outsourcing. Outsourcing is popular. There are many surveys, pro and con, to outsourcing. We're just going to talk about security, the various security features. I know when I got started in IT, and the first time they mentioned possibly trying to save some money and letting an outside group take over some of our security stuff, I'll be honest, I kind of freaked out a little bit. I'm like, oh, heck no, you're not going to let somebody from outside come in and take over my network. And then we stopped to think about it. We very carefully considered the pros and cons, and the next slide I'm going to show you, I actually put all of those things down. But I like this quote. I was working at Verizon recently doing an audit for one of their facilities, and here's the quote. Nothing is ever as simple as it seems. Part of the complexity of security is that its requirements are interwoven throughout the whole business. It's not just hardware. It's business processes and structures. It's staffs and attitudes, and it's data. And I thought this summed things up very well. So I mentioned that we did an assessment, and here you go. I'm not going to try to drive everybody insane and read all of these, but I would like you to take a minute and just take a look at the factors, both for and the factors against. And these are things I've thought of and other security people that I work with on a regular basis. So take a quick look through this list. I mean, the biggest one, the biggest driver for any outsourcing situation, of course, is cost. And let's be honest, the cost angle is a part of doing business. Probably the single biggest negative is the security people, trust me, are not going to take this very well. They're not going to like it. It will take a while to get buy-in. As you look through this list, there's probably more you could add. People can add to this list to be sure. So moving on a little bit, I have one final example for everybody. International Space Station. Does it look infected? The reason I ask this is, yes, the International Space Station was recently infected with a piece of malware. That was, of all things, carried up on a USB stick from a cargo flight. And these are the guys floating around 220 miles above us, and even they're not safe. Final thoughts. I've spent the last almost hour talking doom and gloom. It's not all bad. Just keep two things in mind. We choose what happens. Stop and think. This stuff here, end-user threats targeted specifically in hopes that you will click on a harmful link, attachment, picture, whatever, that's the phishing. It's still the #1 way of getting into a network. Hand in hand with this is the simple requirement that the best security program in the world isn't worth the paper it's written on or the digital bytes it's stored in if we don't pay attention. And if you think about it, this goes true for physical security as well, the simple physical aspects of things. If you're interested, multiple different ways to gain contact. An email address that comes straight to me, business address, and then I do a lot of work internationally, so here's an international email address. Any one of them will reach me. If you're interested in training opportunities here at Global Knowledge, we've got dozens and dozens and dozens of them. So I guess that leaves it open for me to ask about questions. Here's your chance. Fire away.
All right. Thanks, Phil. We've got some questions coming in. First one is, what do you think about online password storage vaults?
Oh, yeah. Obviously, somebody's been at one of my previous presentations. I used to advocate very strongly for use of online storage, these secure storage things that would allow you to store your passwords. You only need to remember the password to the one online account. Unfortunately, there's been several data breaches of these companies. And again, the big thing that's turned me off against them using them now, I've actually canceled the account that I used to have, is we discovered that they weren't encrypting the data. Yeah, the data was secure, but it wasn't in terms of they had it firewalled off, but once somebody gained access to the network, the data was not encrypted. So from this point forward, I don't use them anymore. I just don't. Next question, please.
How do you get started in the computer or network security business?
Well, I got into it when I was in the U.S. Navy back in the 80s. I was formatting, this is back in the floppy disk days, so I'm definitely aging myself here. But I was noticing that when we formatted up magnetic media, that the stuff that was being formatted on a particular PC was coming up about 20 kilobytes smaller than any other. And that led me to start asking why. We ended up uncovering some viruses and some malware. And from that point on, I started searching out training, resources, anything I could find, till eventually ended up where I'm at. So in this day and age, check out training resources. There are plenty of them online. A website that you might check out, securitytube.net. Securitytube, one word, .net. Kind of like YouTube for hackers. And I don't mean for everybody to go out and become a hacker, but what I mean is for you to go out and look at how these people do this stuff. We're in a business where you have to know how the bad guys do it if we're going to stop them. There's also plenty of formal training. Again, if you're interested in the stuff that's offered here at Global Knowledge, talk to your training rep. There's, as you saw in that previous list, there's many, many different opportunities. There's a lot of good introductory online training resources.
All right. Assuming Office email systems are secure, how do you defend against personal email accounts in the Office environment?
Yeah. That's been in the news a lot with some of our politicians using personal email for business opportunities. The simple answer is you can't really. With BYOD, everybody has mobile computing devices. I mean, I have 3 or 4 of them I carry around with me. And as a corporate security person, I can't really stop you from using them. But what I can do is try to make people pay attention. There are plenty of good mobile device security tools. I use 3 of them in layers on my phone to protect it. And then again, you fall back on the training. You train people not to respond. Click on that link that looks too good to be true. I mean, it's an old adage. If you look at your email, you see these things all the time, whether it's business or private. And if you have a doubt about something, ask one of your security people. There's no way any of us can know all of this stuff. So ask. Research online. There's plenty of websites online where you get an email, a curious email. You type in the subject header, and they can tell you whether or not this is a dangerous email.
Okay, yeah, we've got several more coming in. Next one is, if you don't like online password managers, are there any other tools you would recommend for managing passwords?
The one that my wife and I use, and we're getting older, so our memories aren't quite, up to what they were when we were 20. What we do is we use mnemonics. We take a sentence, and we use the first letter or number of each of the words. It makes it surprisingly easy to generate unique passwords. Here in my research lab, I, of course, break the golden rule. I have a cheat sheet on my desktop here. I'm looking at it, as a matter of fact, that I write my passwords down, which is a big no-no. So the best trick I can recommend for you to manage your passwords is use the memory mnemonic trick. For example, if you like a particular movie, take the title of the movie and take some of the letters of the title and make those into a password. I'm not going to give you an example because I'd give you away my passwords, but it works. My wife and I use it all the time. Like I said, my main thing against the online password managers is simply that 2 major breaches have occurred in the last year, one only 3 months ago, and in both cases, the password databases were not encrypted, which I find to be inexcusable in this day and age of network security. So the easiest thing to do, memory mnemonics, that's the way we do it. That's how we do it.
Okay. What are some of the new security threats we should be on the lookout for in the future? Like, where are things trending?
Well, there's the tried and true phishing mechanisms. They're not going to go away. The next biggest trend that I see are compromised websites where simply landing on the website can infect your PC. The defense against that have multiple layers of security, antivirus products, anti-malware products, and a firewall on your PC. The biggest single threat, though, I'll be honest, that I see and encounter every day is mobile devices and the Internet of Things. If you're like myself and some other people, we have a variety of devices that we can access over our phone. Heck, our security system for our house. We have an app that we can access it. My son is an epileptic. He has catastrophic seizures, so when he's at his house, he has a little panic button that he can push if he feels a seizure happening, and it rings an alert on our phones, and we can switch on the webcam and see where he is while the system alerts for medical. The problem with all of these cool devices, this Internet of Things, is right now there is no global, or even here in North America, there are no standards for security. It's left up to the individual vendors. Some of the devices are fairly secure. Other devices have no security whatsoever. Case in point, a friend of mine just put on, he took a Raspberry Pi, one of those open source little PC modules, and he hooked up a system where he could open up his garage door and turn on the lights in his garage as he was pulling up. And, you know, regular garage door openers have done that for years, but he figured out a way to do it electronically. And everything was cool till, excuse me, somebody that should remain nameless but is giving this presentation sat down with a spectrum analyzer, figured out what frequency he was using, and was able to close the garage door as he started to drive in. Now, I only closed it on him for about a foot, but it was enough to get his attention, and he's like, "How did you do that?" And I'm sitting in the passenger seat in his car with my mobile phone, and I said, "Well, the problem is your signal's not encrypted. Anybody with a freeware spectrum analyzer could pick up on this thing and generate the signal." So we, of course, sat down and then figured out how to keep that from happening in the future. But that's just an example. So I think, to sum it up, the biggest threats are probably going to be the Internet of Things, mobile computing devices, and the old standby of phishing.
Okay. How would one find out if their credit card has been hacked, even if there aren't any false purchases on it?
Okay, good question. The single biggest indicator is to look, of course, as was mentioned, for unauthorized purchases. For example, those gaming accounts that opened up. But a lot of these guys are smart. They'll only put a few pennies worth of charges, 99 cents or $1 or whatever. So the other thing you can do is, if you have any suspicions at all, check with your bank. A quick phone call and check with them. Do not, under any circumstances, fall for one of these email links or website links that circulate around that say, enter your credit card information number here and we can tell you if it's stolen. That screenshot I showed you was, I knew those numbers had been stolen, and I went searching through places that I wouldn't let most people go to, looking to see if I could chase down who's got my credit card number. So the best way to do it, watch your credit card, and also just simply check with your bank. We are here in the United States finally implementing chip and PIN. We've gotten as far as a secure chip. The PIN number implementation will be coming along very shortly. By October of 2016, the standard swipe and go credit card will be a thing of the past. We'll be going to a much more secure system that is used everywhere else in the world, and that is the chip and encrypted PIN numbers. So that will take a lot of this off our minds.
Okay. What are your thoughts on the move to getting more systems in the cloud that are critical to the infrastructure that have traditionally been in the data center, and how to secure them?
Boy. I'm part of a project right now. I'm not allowed to talk about the details of it, but I'm part of a project right now where we're addressing that very thing, because we are putting more and more critical infrastructure devices and networks such as power, water, various utilities, and things are becoming interconnected over the internet. It makes sense from a technical perspective. From a security perspective, we don't have a perfect solution right now. I wish we did. We're experimenting with variations of 2 and in some places 3-factor authentication. We're using rotating encryption. We are using encrypted authentication mechanisms. And some of it is just traditional firewalling, and we're also trying to use air gap, physical disconnection whenever possible. But the bottom line is, if we want to network this stuff, it is going to have to be interconnected. So I don't have a perfect answer for you right now. Where do I stand on it? As an engineer, I understand the need for it. As a security guy, it keeps me awake at night.
It seems like a lot of the remaining questions have to do with keeping up to date on cybersecurity. What would be some of the recommended resources? Are certifications worth it? And where would someone start? Where would someone start?
Okay, I'll address the certification part first. Certifications, there's a certification for everything out there. I'm sure we've all met plenty of people that on paper were outstanding candidates, and in the real world, when they were confronted with something, you found out that, yeah, they passed the test, they had the certification, but didn't have a clue as to what to do with it. Certifications are intended to show expertise in an area. So I do advocate using certifications as a benchmark, but you have to take them with a grain of salt. You have to ask yourself, if somebody shows up with 1,700 certifications, what have they been doing for experience while they've been padding their resume? For knowledge and training, one of the websites I use is the Internet Storm Center. That's a good place for looking at threats of the day. They monitor port numbers and tell you what the 10 most targeted port numbers for the particular day are, what services are being accessed. I should have put some resources up there. That's my bad. If you drop me a line, I can email you 4 or 5 different links for places I check. There's a guy over in Europe. I check his blog daily. Dankoff is his name, and I don't remember the URL. I've got it permanently bookmarked on my desktop. Like I said, I spend a lot of time on security focus, looking at the new attacks that people are asking questions about. SecurityTube.net is a great place to go to watch basically their YouTube videos of how these guys do this stuff. And probably about 90% of the people on SecurityTube are security guys like myself. The other 10%, to be honest, are the bad guys. But it's a great way to learn. Where do you go to get training? As I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of free online sources. You could, let me see if I can get this to reverse now. Here are some of the ones we offer here at Global Knowledge, of course. You're also welcome to email me again. I can provide you with a lot more information. I hope I've answered the questions. I'm getting the alert that says it's getting time, that we have to wrap things up. Last shot. Any more questions, Michelle?
Yeah, I think that was it. Thank you so much, Phil, and thank you for all for attending. We will be sending you a link to the recording of this as soon as it becomes available, so be on the lookout for that as well. And I'll let you close them out, Phil.
Okay. So I'd like to thank you all for attending. Feel free to drop me a line. I'm always interested in answering questions or learning about new things. This is an industry where we don't share enough information between ourselves. So thank you very much, and I hope to deal with some of you in the future.
Thank you.